All right, guys. Thanks for joining me this Friday to talk about the SEC and cybersecurity as it is today. Over on the left, you're going to see a Q&A box. At least it's on the left on my screen. I think it might be on yours as well, but somewhere there you should see a Q&A box. At any time, feel free to type into that, and if I see it there and catch it, I'll definitely be sure to address it as we go through. So I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of new faces here. I know it's been a little while since we've done one of these webinars. Little bit of dragging my feet on that, just trying to see what kind of resolution we're getting out of 20649, which we'll talk today. But anyway, we have a little bit more info to dive in, and I can talk about what I'm doing to kind of help my clients through that and think through the cybersecurity regulation that we have coming down. So for those that don't know me, my name is Brian Hahn. I'm the founder here at Tradecraft. I work with several hundred financial institutions dealing with their corporate espionage and cybersecurity awareness training, doing their cybersecurity audits, risk assessments, cyber risk assessments, so on and so forth. The vast majority of my clients are RIAs. I do have a few hedge funds and family offices and institutions kind of spread throughout there. But for the most part, I do focus on SEC registered firms, whether it's just SEC or dual registered. I've done some intelligence contracting in Costa Rica as my background, and then also some work at Bridgewater Associates and CS Analytics. And then I've also held a role as CCO and COO for a couple different SEC registered firms. So been doing this for a little while. And today I just kind of want to share what I do and what I've used through the years, not only organizing myself when I was in charge of doing this for my firm, but also now what I do to help my clients think through it and how to organize their firms. So in my mind, there's really kind of 7 staples of a good cybersecurity documentation, compliance documentation. One would be that cybersecurity policies and procedures manual. Whether you tie that into your standard policies and procedures manual or have it completely separate, that's up to you. I don't really think that makes a difference, but I definitely like to see pages dedicated to cybersecurity that outlines who's in charge of it, what technology is in place, who has access to that technology, who's responsible for updating, so on and so forth. So I do like to see a very broad policy that covers the entire firm. One that I see probably 90% of my clients missing is a employee technology usage agreement. And this is agreement that I like to have my firms have their employees sign at onboarding and also to reaffirm annually when they go through their annual compliance training. This would be specific for each firm, but basically outlines the employee responsibility, what they can and can't do with the technology. For instance, perhaps they can't go to Starbucks and connect to public Wi-Fi, without VPN in place. So a policies and procedures manual or an agreement between the firm and the employee about how the employee will use the technology and what their responsibilities are. I also like to see, and the SEC likes to see, cybersecurity awareness training. So if you don't have a program in place, kind of a quick tip, but check out Fieldcraft. It's our program that we put out there to help firms go through this. There's others out there as well, whether you want to outsource that or do it internally. Having some cybersecurity awareness training in place and doing that annually is important. If you've seen some of our other documentation that we put out, that's one of the ones that the SEC requests pretty frequently to see evidence of that. So those are kind of the 3, in my mind, I call them the boring documents. They're really not very technical at all. The last 4, user authorization management, cyber risk threat assessments, vulnerability scans, and network maps, they all tend to be more technical, and these are the ones that I really see firms struggle with, or perhaps they don't quite understand what is needed from them, so on and so forth. So those are the ones I'm really going to focus on today. If you're missing a policies and procedures manual or you're missing an employee technology usage agreement, just shoot me a quick email. I'm happy to send you over a template if you want to work that into your firm. So, if that's something you need, just reach out. I can certainly help you with that. User authorization management is one that I think is going to become more and more important as we see cybersecurity guidance become regulation. We're going to need a very clear way of tracking what users have access to what systems and what level of access they have to those systems. I think we're also seeing more and more requests for threat assessments or kind of pre-attack assessments and cybersecurity risk assessments. So I'm going to cover that today as well. The goal of this is to show you what your firm, the goal of the risk assessment is to show you what your firm looks like to a hacker. Where's the vulnerability at? What are they going to attack? So I'll cover how firms should be doing that today. Vulnerability scans, I've covered them in other audits on how to go in and actually do them and perform the vulnerability scan, so I'm not going to touch on that today, but I am going to touch on how I take the information from those scans and then organize them into a way that shows we're on top of them, we're working through them, and we're also making sure that these vulnerabilities are not connected to sensitive client data. So I'll show you how we walk through that as well. And then also network maps. I'm big on network maps because one, the SEC requests graphical maps of how data is interacting between different systems on the network. But this also provides us an opportunity to really build a solid compliance program and understand our IT infrastructure. So we're going to talk a lot about network maps today. So I'm really bad on dates. No one hold me to this, but I think it was the beginning of February of this year where the SEC announced 20649. And very quickly, we're not going to get into the legal laws and the regulations because I'm certainly not a lawyer and I'm leaning on others to understand this probably just like you are. But from the larger overview of what's happening is prior, we've had cybersecurity guidance from the SEC. In other words, they put out documentation and say, hey, through our examinations, these are the things that we're seeing firms do. This is what we recommend that you do. So we've had cybersecurity guidance from the SEC for quite a while. What we tend to be, what we look to be moving towards now is going to be cybersecurity regulation, where they're taking a lot of the guidance and turning it into actual regulation and figuring out a way to do that. So what you see on the screen was a quick fact sheet that they released when they announced this in February. I highly encourage you to download this and read through it. The reality is there's really not much difference, because I know we've had clients that reached out to us that had gone through one of our assessments prior to 20649, and then they're reaching out and wondering what's changed. Really, nothing has changed. Like I said, we're just going from suggestions or guidance to actual regulation. So if in the way, I've always worked in the past, and this was just the easiest for me to organize what I needed, was I just started collecting the different examination request lists, like you see on the list that the SEC was sending different firms about cybersecurity, and then tracking all those different requests in the document that you see to the right. So if you haven't seen that document or need access to it, again, just let me know. But this is a great document to go through, and just understand when the SEC does come in, this is what they're going to be requesting, and actually see what it looks like on the back end. To me, my opinion is that what they request on the back end is actually very different than what they've been giving in guidance. So my hope is that 20649 will help firm this up for firms and make it a little more clear, what their responsibilities are. So I always like to talk about just kind of the high level before we talk into the technicals of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to show the SEC that we're doing. Essentially, we have the threats. So on the left here, you can see a bar graph of the range of different vectors or attack vectors that we saw in cybersecurity attacks. And of course, some attacks can include, some aspect of phishing and then taking care of an unpatched vulnerability. And then, maybe doing some denial of service. So there can be multiple attack vectors within, any given attack. But for the most part, the largest attack vector that we see is phishing. And so that kind of circles back to why training is so important, teaching people, not to open those emails. So those are the threats. And what we're trying to do, really, you know, I should change this little circular graph on the right to have information and assets in the middle. Because I always tell my clients we're really protecting two things. One, we're protecting data, so the firm's data, client data, accounting data, whatever you want to call it, and we're actually protecting assets. So for you guys that don't have custody of assets, this is actually a lot easier than firms that do have custody. But ultimately, what we're trying to show is that we have our information and we have our assets secured in a manner that encompasses all aspects of an attack. So organizational security, personal security, you know, making sure our employees are trained and not doing stupid stuff on the internet, physical security, making sure computers are locked, locking screens, locking server closets, making sure our hardware, our software, and our communication systems are up to date. And then, of course, applying encryption and other nature around the actual data to protect it. So that's what we're trying to organize and show the SEC that we're on top of and that we're working through. So I'm going to talk today. I use a program called Maltego to organize a lot of information for my clients. I'm not affiliated with Maltego. I pay the full retail price, just like you guys would. But the one reason I like Maltego is that they have a free version that allows our clients to interact and use this data after we build it. The free version allows something like 10,000 different nodes on it, which is plenty for most firms. So I use Maltego as it's almost like a mind mapping software for IT systems. And so there's a lot of built-in, you know, kind of drag and drop functionality where you can fill in your network. So I use this to do my network mapping. I use this to create my IT checklist and understand, you know, so if the SEC comes in and says, hey, give us a list of every system on your network or every laptop or desktop, we can easily produce that list from this map in Maltego. I use it for patch management to make sure that everything on my network, servers, laptops, desktops are updated and patched. I use it for my threat and vulnerability management to make sure I'm on top of the different vulnerabilities that are out there and making sure they're separated from the network. I even use it for HR and user access rights. So a lot of firms have their own HR system, totally fine. But if you don't, this is a great system to organize information about your employees and also track their user access rights. Also use it for reputation management and social media intelligence on here. So if we have a firm that wants to set this up to capture all the Facebook post an employee or the firm's putting out, we can certainly do that to make sure that we're tracking reputation management and whatever other risks there may be out there, we can show it through there. So the bubble graph here is what you see is an actual network map. So this is what the map would look like when you put it all together. And of course, I'll dive in. Let me show you just kind of quickly here what a live version looks like. And then I've got some screenshots that'll be a little bit cleaner. But this is a Maltego map that you're seeing here. And you can zoom in and out. It's interactive. We can drag and drop. We can edit. We can add all kinds of information in here. And we'll dive back to that when we go through a couple screenshots here. So when you look at any particular node, you can click on it and get access to information that you can put in here. So here's a quick overview of how I would use it for HR. I would show the company, which would be Vela Ford. Vela Ford has a main domain, velaford.com. And on that domain is a secure portal called securevelaford.com. And so Vela Ford has an employee named John Doe. And if I look over on the right, I can see all kinds of information about John Doe that we can add in there. Chief Compliance Officer, he has admin user access rights. We have his hire date. He's a current employee. There's no termination date. And we can customize this for whatever information we need to track about the employee. And then we can also show the email address that employee is using, their cell phone number, and that they have admin access to securevelaford.com. So this is a very, very simple map. It can get really complicated, very easy, while still being very simple and easy to produce information from. So that'll make sense here when we dive into it a little bit more. Here is diving in further. If we look at securevelaford.com from this last map, this is what it would look like. And what you're seeing up here at the top is securevela4.com. And down below it is going to be all the information that is associated with that particular portal. So what ports are open on that server, what systems are running on it, what hosts are coming out of it. If we have a domain name, vela4.com, what operating system, there's a lot of information that we want to track here about it. So if you see over here on the right, you can see a server list of all the different information. It's going to talk about the different SSL certificates, some remote code execution that's going on there. The idea is that we just want to know everything about this host and have every bit of information in one document or one setting. So kind of 2 points here. One, it makes it super easy if we ever need to respond to an SEC request for information. Two, it helps as a CCO or as a CISO, it really helps to understand what is on your network. And three, it makes it really easy to know if you have a vulnerability that might be affecting your network. The most recent example I can give of this was the Log4j vulnerability, which started hitting the news networks. So a lot of clients who don't have this kind of information at hand may have been stuck kind of wondering, hey, do we have anything that is susceptible to Log4j or the JavaScript vulnerability? And that was a hard question for a lot of firms to answer. When you have a network map like this built in Maltego, you can very easily open it up, hit that Control F for find, and then type in the vulnerability or type in the system that would be affected by that vulnerability and see if it's anywhere on your network. So it's literally a 30-second query to understand if that particular vulnerability may be on your network. So this is really handy for, a lot of times I recommend for our firms, the CCOs, to sign up for the CISA releases that come out every week, Tuesday, where they list the new vulnerabilities. It's super easy to open that email, kind of scan through them and see if any systems look familiar to you. And if you have questions, you just go and quick search and see if that's a system on your network. So diving in, if we go the other side, what we just looked at securevela4.com would be what I call an external map. So that's an external facing server that was facing clients. People from, clients sitting at home could access that portal. So it was external facing. But we also want to build network maps internal facing for the same reason, so that we know what systems are on our network. We have that checklist of everything that's connected. We know serial numbers, we know MAC addresses. We can literally answer everything that's every question about everything that's connected to our network. So here you can see we have the Dunder Mifflin office, the branch that's located in Scranton. And then we have 2 sample IP addresses or 2 sample hosts that were found within that particular building. One is at scanner.dundermifflin.local. And the other one is pam.dundermifflin.local. And so here we can see all the services that are running on those particular devices. If we highlight Pam's machine over here, we can see, again, all the different systems, software, if they have remote desktop connection open. All that information is brought into here so that we can organize and understand what's going on there. So again, this is very simple, but just to show you what a couple host would look like. The one other thing I can say here is, as an example, is if you see the time bomb here. So whenever I'm working through a vulnerability on the network, I'll actually make a little graph on here for whatever that vulnerability may be, just so we have a very clear understanding of how it may be affecting the network, whether it may or may not be affecting that network. And also, with the map, I can share it with different people. We can talk about what's going on there. And of course, if I click on that vulnerability, it's going to give me all of the information that I need to work through it. So that's one way I use it for vulnerability mapping. The question always comes up, well, how do you find the vulnerability? And I cover that in other webinars. I'm not going to go into it too much today, but I use Nessus. There's a lot of other great programs out there, but whatever you choose, it's generally just exporting the vulnerabilities out in like Excel or XML format, and then importing them into Maltego here. So it's super easy, helps you track everything. And then the last one I'll show is where I use it for threat management or risk assessment for the firms. And for me, this is a very important one that I think firms need to be doing. In a nutshell, what I want to understand is how much information has already been leaked about my firm. So what we want to know is, are usernames already out there? Are passwords already out there? Can a hacker fingerprint my employees and understand what kind of systems they're using in order to craft a malicious attack? So this is what we want to understand. We want to understand how the hacker looks at the firm, and for us, this kind of fills that SEC risk assessment. So real simple here, you can see at the top, I took an email address of john.doe@gmail.com. And down below that, I ran it through a database called Have I Been Pwned? I think probably several people have used that, but essentially it's a website you can go to, you can put in your email address, and it'll tell you what breaches the information has been lost in, or what breaches your email address was included in. And then internally, we have about 8 terabytes of breach data that we collect and research to do threat assessments for our clients. We also run it through there. But the idea is down below, you can see a list of all the different breaches that this particular email address was found in. So, audiyusa.com, it's generally, you're going to see here, you can see a adobe.com, bonobos.com, which they make clothing. I generally always see Adobe, Canva, LinkedIn. These are very common breaches that are out there that people have used their email addresses for. So I'll usually put a little note there too, just to show that we kind of did some research on the breach. We understand what was lost there. And then down below, I will map the different information that was lost in those breaches. So I'm always most concerned about usernames, passwords, IP addresses, historical passwords, password hints, driver's licenses now. A lot of people use the, I think it's alcohol and food delivery service called Drizzly during COVID, and they would upload their driver's licenses to that. And then Drizzly suffered a big breach, and now everyone's driver's license is out on the market. A driver's license is very devastating. A lot of trade desks will use a driver's license as an authorization for trade confirmations if they don't believe a trade command. So these are ones that we're really concerned about, and we want to know if we've had an employee, especially if they have access to trading or custodian or cashiering, we want to know if their driver's license has been lost out there. So the idea here is we're just trying to understand what information is out there so that we can go to employees and really reiterate the fact of having good password hygiene, making sure they're not reusing passwords, making sure that there's two-factor authentication in place, all these things that are very simple steps that prevent hacks. The other thing, it's not captured in this graph, but the other thing that I like to do is use this Maltego to make sure that no one can fingerprint my employees. And so what I'll generally do is go to my client's website, or you would go to your website, and you would download every document or PDF or any download that you have available from your website. You actually pull those downloads, and then you go through the metadata of them. And what you're trying to do is pull usernames out of the metadata. We're trying to understand what versions of Adobe you're using and what versions of Word you're doing, or you're using to create these documents. Because if I can understand the versions that you're using of these documents, if you've seen my webinar where I go through and show you how you phish an employee, and we go through actually creating a malicious email and a malicious PDF, if I know what version of Adobe you're using, I'm much more likely to be successful crafting a malicious PDF to hack your employees. So that's part of the fingerprinting. Again, we just want to know what information is already out there for the clients. Here you can see we've already gathered usernames, passwords, and IP addresses, and I've never even touched a system owned by this firm to gather this information. This is all publicly available data. So very concerning, and we just want to make sure we have a good solid picture of that. So when the SEC comes in and says, hey, what are you doing to be proactive about your cybersecurity risk assessment? We can say, hey, one, we're doing this left of boom threat intelligence work, where we're going through and making sure that there's nothing out there that could lead to an easy compromise. And two, we're making sure that we're doing our vulnerability scans on software and network to make sure that, you know, systems are patched, remote desktop connections not open, so on and so forth. So that's, let me jump to, I wanted to kind of show you just a real life example here so you can see how it all comes together. Again, we're going to go back to the Vela Ford example. If I click on Vela Ford up here at the top, you can see I'm really looking at two domains over here, or two sources over here on the right. And the way I think about those is velaford.com is going to be my external domain, where I have all my external servers facing, you know, email, whether it's in the cloud or however you may have that set up, client portals, you know, things of this nature are going to be included under that external domain. And then I also will list the office address. So you can see here, if I click on the office, there was an office in Austin, Texas. Over on the right, you can see the different IP addresses of the hosts that are associated in that office. So, you know, if I'm here in the interactive map and I want to understand what might be in the Austin office, I can click over here on a particular IP and it'll take me to that address. And then again, it will show me all of the information about that particular system. Two, if I click on it, we can also see that the properties here would capture its IP address, its MAC address, what kind of operating system it is, and so on and so forth. You know, this is great. You can come down and say, okay, hey, look, this is the one I come across a lot, like the splash top streamer. You know, a lot of firms have no idea that their employees have set up remote desktop connection or are using some kind of desktop streaming service. And, you know, without prior approval and making sure it's done correctly, this can be a, you know, a serious cybersecurity threat. So these are the different things, you know, I like to show and just make sure that we're understanding, so we can go, you know, okay, Jennifer's machine has remote desktop connection open. She's been authorized on that, and we can go back through and make sure that, you know, it's done in a secure manner. So that's, you know, that's the live graph, the way I go through and build this. When I turn this over to my clients, again, they can interact with it and edit it and do whatever they need in the free version, which makes it awesome. I use the paid version because we automate a lot of this data gathering and put it together in reporting. But the free version will do all of that for you. You know, the one thing that makes it very simple is there's a lot of information here. But what we can do if we need to, we can come in and just, for instance, highlight a couple of different hosts, and then we can come up to import, export, generate report, and go through and produce a PDF or whatever we need, whether it's for internal documentation or for regulators. So it just makes it really easy to organize a bunch of information, and when the time comes, put it into a PDF format or something that's easily digestible for regulators. But that's it. That's, you know, again, not saying this is the absolute best way to, you know, to organize the information, but I can tell you through my years of having this work kind of thrown on my desk and having to figure it out, and then now supporting multiple clients, I can take Multigo and I can take this framework and apply it to just about any firm and build a very solid cybersecurity compliance documentation. So again, it's not to say, you know, if you're doing this and you're capturing this information in another way, fantastic, you know, do what works for you. But for me, this has been the easiest way for, you know, for me to work with a client and organize all that information that they need. So if you're looking for a method or you're worried about 20649, you know, Multigo is a great one to look at, you know, to get on top of that and really get on top of your cybersecurity compliance documentation. So any questions or anything like that, I'm certainly happy to answer them. Reach out and you know, we can talk specifics about your firm. If you have any questions about what you should be doing or that sort of thing, always happy to help there. So again, if you would like the templates for the policies and procedures manual or the employee technology usage agreement, or if you'd like to see that document where we track all of the requests that the SEC has sent clients, just feel free to reach out, shoot me a quick email or text, whatever is more convenient for you, and I'll shoot over a PDF to you of that information. So Again, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this Friday to talk about cybersecurity and SEC compliance. I know those two topics are generally pretty low on people's list, and when you combine them together, they get even lower. But I hope this was painless and showed you a little bit of insight about how to tackle, some of the more complex things or the more technical issues that are going to be surrounded with 20649 and everything that's coming out. So if you need to reach me, brian@mtradecraft.com is going to be my email address, easiest way to get a hold of me. And then my phone number below also works as well. So again, thank you guys so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and then I'll get a recording of this probably out this afternoon, if not this afternoon, a little bit into the weekend if you need to share it within your firm. So we'll have that available. Again, thank you very much. Hope you all have a fantastic day.